Welcome to Electric Transport. In previous episodes, I've discussed some of the challenges of driving an electric car in cold or extreme weather. Now is the chance to put my money where my mouth is as I plan a trip from Winnipeg to Saskatoon, a 780 kilometer journey across the Canadian prairies in a Model 3 in the winter. This trip would have been pretty difficult just a few months ago before Tesla's supercharger network had been activated. Now I need to be in Saskatoon for business Tuesday evening, and so I will depart Tuesday morning. An 8-hour drive should be okay, I should get there in time, but I'll need to plan a little bit and I'll need to see how my charging works along the way. So let's see how it goes. Now, when I'm planning a trip, I like to use an app called abetterrouteplanner.com, which is also available as a website. So the nice thing about this is that it does a really good job of planning. It includes charging stations. It includes how long you're going to stay in each charging station. It includes the cost and how much time the total trip is. So it's a really good planner. So what I want to do is I want to plan a trip for this week. I'm going to be going to Saskatoon from Winnipeg. So I'm going to use my position in Winnipeg, and I'm going to go to and then I'm going to plan this route. Just go into settings and I'll show you exactly some of the things that this is thinking about. So it knows what kind of car I have. It knows the consumption per kilometer at 110 kilometers an hour. It has the average speed and the maximum speed and what charge I'm going to depart at and the minimum that I'm going to allow it to have the battery drop down before I get to a new charger. So 20% I set usually in the winter. And then the goal is because the city of Saskatoon doesn't have a supercharger, I'm setting the minimum at 40%, so at least that I can get back to a supercharger on the way home. So there are more things that you can set. You can set the outside temperature. So actually that's a good thing to make sure I change. It is the winter, so I'm going to set it to winter temperatures. I'm going to assume that the roads will be dry. And battery degradation, I'm going to assume is 5%, which I think is realistic. And then you can even get down to the time to open the charge port, which is kind of ridiculous. But now I'm only going to allow it to use superchargers. I'm not going to use anything else. But if I had another type of car, for example, I could select CCS instead of superchargers. Or if I was in an area where there were no superchargers, obviously I could select level 2 chargers to include that. But I could set a minimum, for example, kilowatt that I'm going to allow. So you can have somewhat rapid level 2 chargers as opposed to poorer level chargers. On the road, I could say that I want to avoid ferries, I want to avoid toll roads, I want to avoid highways, but for this trip, I'm going to leave everything out. So we're going to go ahead and plan the route. So it's come up with an algorithm to allow me to get there as fast as possible. So what it does is it minimizes the amount of time you're spending at any one supercharger. So for example, my first stop would be in Brandon, which is just a few hours away from Winnipeg. And then it's saying that I would arrive there at 29% battery. And it doesn't suggest that I stay and fully charge the battery. It's saying that I can get to my next supercharger in Whitewood here by only charging to 86%. And that means I only have to stay at the supercharger for 20 minutes and then I can move on. The nice thing is it also tallies up the costs. So if I can tell that the whole trip to Saskatoon is going to cost me $36, which is great. It's just a fraction of the cost of a trip with a gas vehicle. Now it's telling me that I'm going to arrive in Saskatoon with 40%, which is exactly what I suggested. Now, I don't have to do this. This is just a guide. I could, for example, the last supercharger before I reach Saskatoon is going to be Davidson, and I could stay instead of 10 minutes or 11 minutes, I could stay a little bit longer and fully charge my battery so that when I get to Saskatoon, I have a lot more. So let's go back and say my goal arrival percentage is, say, 70%. And now I can reset that. And so now it's suggesting that instead of 11 minutes, I stay 35 minutes in Davidson, and I'm going to fully charge to 100%, which means I get into Saskatoon with 70% battery. So this is just a guide. You can fiddle around with the numbers, obviously, but it does a really good job. Then it'll tell you, it has a nice little description all along the route. You can see exactly how long you're going to spend in each place, how much it's going to cost, and it'll also tell you how many stalls are available. And I believe you can actually go in and get a lot more information. So yeah, it'll tell you what amenities are available. So you have these things within walking distance of the supercharger. So there's a lot more information. This is right on the Tesla website, which is linked by this link if you go to the charger homepage. So it's a great planner and can be used on the website or as an app. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to set up my car for the trip tomorrow. So I'm going to go into the battery and have a look and see where it's set. And it looks like it's set to charge to 80%, which is perfect. And then I'm going to set up a schedule for tomorrow morning. So I want the car to precondition and pre-warm itself so that when I leave at 8:30, it's all ready and set to go, which it is. Now I'm going to set up the navigation. So I'm going to set it up to go to the supercharger in Brandon, which is my next step in the journey. And this way it will pre-warm the battery so that when I arrive in Brandon, it's under optimal conditions to be able to receive a supercharger at the fastest rate. This is a great way of optimizing in advance. Start out, I'm going to have a look at and fine-tune some of the navigation that I had set up the night before. So I want to look and see at the new temperature now in the morning, which is colder, and Tesla does a good job of estimating the distance, of course, that it'll be traveled and the percentage battery that it'll be at when I arrive. So it looks like here 218 kilometers, and I'll arrive in Brandon with about 10% battery. Now if I switch over to my energy screen and just have a look at my projected arrival energy, you can see here this is a trip profile. So I'm leaving here at 72%, which is what I charged to this morning. And by the time I reach Brandon, I should be at 12%. Which is just about right. And it does fluctuate a little bit with the trip and changes in temperature and the consumption, of course, the speed, the wind, all those features it does take into consideration. So as my trip is progressing, we can take a look at the current consumption. So this is looking at the instant range of the last 50 kilometers. You can see here we're at 198 watt hours per kilometer, and that gives us an estimated range of another 257 kilometers. Now, if we look at something which is more focused, looking at the last 10 kilometers, you can see here the consumption's a little bit higher as I've been progressing along the highway and taking more headwind, which is normal because the headwind does affect the car in an exponential manner. The faster you go, the more force and the more the car has to overcome that force. So this is normal, and 210, 214 watt hours per kilometer is pretty normal. So in 2 hours and 218 kilometers later, I pull up into Brandon, very easily find the supercharger, plug in, and the stop in Brandon was pretty quick, and I do mean quick. The speeds that I was getting at the supercharger were actually pretty impressive. About 100 kilowatts gave me about close to 700 or 650, let's say, kilometers an hour charging speed. And in less than 20 minutes, I was ready to go on my way towards Regina. So just about to head off from Brandon to Regina. Let's have a look and see there's a supercharging station between the two, which is Whitewood, Saskatchewan. So not very far, just under 200 kilometers, an hour and 24 minutes. Be there with 37% battery. But let's have a look here. We'll look at Regina. If we go straight to Regina, so we would get there, it's 330 kilometers, about 3.5 hours, and we would get there with just about 20% battery. So I think that's pretty good. That's I think what we'll do. So I think everything's set up here. So we'll just head off now to Regina. The nice thing about a lot of these superchargers is that they're very conveniently located close to the Trans-Canada. So this one is no exception. We're in a little, well, not so little actually, a large mall, which is about 2 kilometers just off the Trans-Canada. So we're making good progress now between Brandon and Regina. When we check out the energy profile, we can see that our consumption a little bit higher than it has been, but still around just over 260 now. So that's instantaneous, so it's changing quite rapidly, but say about 260 watt hours per kilometer. You can see here that we're still doing well for how we are using our energy. We'll arrive with over 20% of the battery. Now arrived in Regina and plug in, and I am absolutely blown away by the speeds. This supercharger charges at 203 at one point, 1,300 kilometers an hour. That's absolutely amazing. 35 minutes to charge fully the battery, and that was from actually quite a bit below 20%. Now after a quick lunch, I get on the road again and head to Saskatoon with a stop in Davidson. So far so good. This trip has been fantastic. Just over 8 hours, I arrive in Saskatoon, and I had about 60% of the battery left over, which was exactly what I had planned for. And so I was lucky. The Airbnb where I stayed in Saskatoon ended up having an external plug, so I used a 110 volt plug to be able to plug in the car, and I gained enough juice by the morning to have a full battery for my return trip. So after 2 nights and getting my business done in Saskatoon, I turned around and did the exact same pattern of stops for my return journey to Winnipeg. It was completely uneventful as the outbound trip was, and I would say that all the superchargers worked great, and the rapid charging speeds made the trip really quick and very, very easy to do. The bottom line is that travel in an electric car, even in the extreme weather of cold months, You definitely do see a decrease in the range. As I've mentioned in a previous episode, it is about 20% decrease. However, with the current infrastructure of superchargers right along the Trans-Canada, this isn't an issue. Even with the reduced range, I was able to make with with great amount of ease and confidence. I was able to drive for 2.5, even in one case 3 hours without any concerns. And there were superchargers that I actually passed by. So if you had a shorter range car, you could certainly make it. For driving on a road trip in cold weather in a Model 3, this has been Electric Transport. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to be notified of the next episode automatically, just hit the bell.